Welcome everybody to the 2025 webinar series for the Northeast Ohio Pollinator Society. I'm Suzanne Westlake. I am the president of the society. A little bit of a new face this year. You've seen me before, but I'll be taking care of hosting the webinars from here on out. If you don't know, Andrew Holden left OSU Extension early last year. I came back from Christmas break last year, and my two favorite people from across the hall left at the same time, and he was one of them. So we have been making strides in the Pollinator Society to kind of change and merge out of OSU Extension. If you didn't hear me talking to Dave earlier, that's why you got an email from a MailChimp listserv, because we're now getting our own listserv, and this is our own Zoom webinar. I will be recording this. I'm recording it now, and I will be posting it on our YouTube page. So you're gonna have to give me a couple days to figure that out. I've never posted anything on YouTube before, so everything is kind of a new little stepping stone. But you found us. Here we are. We're still here, and we're still going to provide you with quality content. Like tonight, we have Dave Tomashefski, who is the education specialist at Meadow City Native Plant Nursery, and he is going to talk to you tonight about soft landings in your garden. So Dave, take it away.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here this evening, and I'll just launch right into it. Our talk is making the most of your tree with a soft landings garden. And as we'll learn, soft landings garden is simply a type of shade garden consisting of native plants planted at the base of your tree. Now I'm just going to start out giving a little background on native plants and their importance. So native plants, these are simply the plants that are present in an area purely as a result of natural phenomena. So they weren't introduced by people. And this means that in most cases, these plants have been here for a very long time, thousands of years at least. And since native plants have been here for so long, the local wildlife has had the time to evolve the ability to use these plants as a food source. This is a very slow process. It takes a very long time, but it means that today our wildlife can eat native plants, but in many cases cannot eat non-native plants. And our native plant communities, by virtue of their food value, they have become the centers of entire ecosystems of thousands of organisms that are fundamentally depending on those native plants for their food. So this is a map of Ohio's native plant communities at the time of European colonization, and you can see that in Northeast Ohio, our dominant native plant community is the beech maple forest, named for our two most abundant forest trees, the American beech and the sugar maple. But this is much more than just a plant community. It's really an entire ecosystem that historically would have supported organisms like the rosy maple moth, the wood thrush, the black bear, and many, many more. But there are lots of other native plant communities in Northeast Ohio, and indeed, there's quite a lot of diversity with our native plants. So all of this wildlife that is depending on the native plants for its food and shelter, how's it doing? Unfortunately, there are some troubling trends. So since 1970, there has been a 29% decrease in bird abundance throughout North America. So this, of course, is one troubling indicator of a major group of organisms. 29% fewer birds in North America today than there were in 1970. And while, this trend kind of differs from one ecosystem to another, it's overall a big loss. And one of the ecosystems that's been hit most severely are the grassland ecosystem. And here we have a bird that's kind of emblematic of this decrease in bird abundance, this is the bobolink. It's declined 56% in the past 50 years. I love the plumage on this bird. It's described to look like it's wearing a tuxedo backwards, and I think that's just a perfect description. Now, looking at Ohio specifically and shifting to another group of organisms, just in the past 20 years, there has been a 33% decrease in butterfly abundance in the state of Ohio. And pictured here is a beautiful butterfly called the Aphrodite fritillary, and that's one of the most rapidly declining species. And you can see here that it's nectaring on the very well-named butterfly milkweed. Now, if we look at bees, we find similar kind of evidence of declines. There are approximately 50 species of North American bumblebees. Bumblebees have been studied most intensively, and 26% of those bumblebee species are threatened with extinction. In the past 20 years, there have been very steep declines in particular species, such as the rusty patch bumblebee pictured here. Just in the past 20 years, it has declined by 87%. So there are a lot of factors contributing to these downward trends in our wildlife. There's the introduction of novel pathogens. There's the widespread use of insecticides. The overall number one kind of overarching cause for our losses in these organisms is habitat loss. It's the loss of those native plant communities that this wildlife is depending on for its food and shelter. And this habitat loss is stemming from primarily agricultural expansion and increasing urbanization. And you can see here in this image how urban sprawl carves up a once intact woodland into much smaller pieces. And the wildlife that then exists within those small islands is much more prone to external threats and stressors. Now, the good news is that we have a huge opportunity to create wildlife habitat simply by planting native plants in our yards. And one of the most important places that we can do this is at the base of our trees. So why is the base of the tree such an important spot for our native plant landscaping? In order to answer that question, let's take a closer look at what trees have to offer to our yards and our wildlife. Trees are oftentimes the focal point of our home landscaping. They have dramatic size, interesting structure, and striking seasonal color, as you can see here with this red maple in its fall foliage. But trees also have outstanding wildlife value. And a lot of this wildlife value stems from the size of trees. Think of a tree relative to a wildflower. The tree is so many times bigger, and the wildlife benefits that the tree offers are similarly going to be on a much larger scale. So, what are those wildlife benefits? Let's take a look at a few of them. First of all, many of our trees are insect pollinated. This means that when those trees are in flower, they are producing a tremendous amount of pollen and nectar, which is food for our bees, butterflies, moths, and other pollinators. And the timing at which our trees are producing these floral resources is really critical. Lots of our native trees are flowering in the springtime. And that's a time when the pollinators are out, but they don't have access to many wildflowers. Of course, there are spring ephemerals in the woods, but if you go into open, sunny landscapes, there aren't that many flowers that are blooming before the month of June. Our trees, our insect-pollinated trees, are filling a crucial time point in the annual foraging of our pollinators. Um, and here's a perfect example of it. So this is a black cherry. About midway through the month of May, black cherry gets covered with these spires of delicate white flowers. And these are a great source of pollen and nectar to many different pollinators, such as this large carpenter bee that you see here. The next wildlife benefit that I would like to highlight for our trees is they produce fruits and nuts. And these are a major dietary component for lots of our birds and mammals and small mammals. And because of the pollination provided by that large carpenter bee and other pollinators, that black cherry was able to produce its fruits. And here you can see a juvenile cedar waxwing, really having a great time eating those black cherries, which are relished by so many birds. But so many of our trees produce fruits and nuts. Think about oak acorns, hickory nuts, black walnuts, service berries, hackberries. The list goes on, and it's really a windfall for lots of our birds and mammals. Now, the third wildlife benefit that I would highlight for our trees is one that lots of people, forget about or they're not aware of, and that is our trees are a food source for a huge number of caterpillars. In fact, they're the most important food source for our caterpillars. But this wildlife benefit that our trees are providing, it really applies almost exclusively just to our native trees. Non-native trees, for those evolutionary reasons that I alluded to earlier, they do not support a significant number of caterpillars in terms of their ability to feed those caterpillars. But our native trees, they are a boon to the caterpillars, and especially trees in the oaks, the cherries, the willows. Native trees in those three groups, a single tree will, has the capacity to feed over 300 different species of caterpillars. And, why are caterpillars important? Why are they, something that we should be focusing on ecologically? Well, first of all, caterpillars, of course, are going to mature into moths and butterflies, beautiful creatures that have their own intrinsic value. But also, caterpillars are some of the most important organisms for supporting higher levels of the food chain, and especially birds. Birds are, they rely heavily on caterpillars, and we have a great example right here on the screen. So to continue with our black cherry case study, what we're looking at here are eastern tent caterpillars, and they're feeding on the foliage of black cherry. It's one of their absolute favorite host plants. And the eastern tent caterpillar, it's active in the springtime. It forms a web-like nest in the joints of the tree. Perhaps you've seen these nests. They look almost like a cluster of spider webs, near the base of the tree branch. And you'll see them sometimes if you're driving along I-71, you'll see these trees along the road that look like they have these big spider webs. That's the eastern tent caterpillar. And a lot of those trees that you see, that it's occupying are black cherries. But this is a hairy caterpillar. And hairy caterpillars, that's pretty good defense against bird predation. Birds generally will avoid the hairy caterpillar. But even though the eastern tent caterpillar is a hairy caterpillar, there are several species of birds that do rely heavily on it as a food source. The cuckoos, black-billed cuckoos, yellow-billed cuckoos, they will gobble these things up. And one of the reasons they can do that is because they are actually able to regurgitate their stomach lining. So all of these hairs that would cause internal problems to other birds, the cuckoos, they can eat with impunity. And so the eastern tent caterpillar is a major food source for those cuckoos. It's also a major food source for the Baltimore oriole. This is my favorite bird. It's a great looking bird. It's a beautiful singer. And it actually has devised a very clever way to get around the hairy defense of this caterpillar. It doesn't eat the caterpillar whole. As you can see in this image on the right, it just pierces the caterpillar's exoskeleton, and it just eats it from the inside out. So a little bit gruesome there, but that's how nature works. And but certainly an important food source for the birds. And as important as caterpillars are for adult birds, they're even more important for the nestlings. 96% of our land-dwelling birds rely on caterpillars as the primary food source for their nestlings. And here we have an outstanding example of that. This is the wood thrush, and it is feeding its chick, this big, juicy green caterpillar. And with this image, you can see the advantage of a smooth caterpillar. This parent wood thrush, it's just going to stuff that caterpillar down its baby's throat, and it doesn't have to worry about injuring that delicate throat. And this is a very nutritional snack for this chick. Lots of important nutrients and healthy fats in that caterpillar for the growing bird. Now, thankfully, not all of the caterpillars get eaten by the birds. The caterpillars that evade the birds, they're going to continue foraging on the leaves of the tree up in the canopy until it's time for them to form their cocoon and to undergo their pupation to their adult form. Now, this is the critical point. For 90% of our caterpillar species, the cocoon stage doesn't happen up in the canopy of the tree. It happens on the ground at the base of the tree. So when that caterpillar is ready to form its cocoon, it's going to descend down from the tree canopy to the ground below. And that's what's happening in this image. Now, once on the ground, that caterpillar, for a lot of species, it's going to burrow a short ways into the soil, and it's actually going to undergo its cocoon stage underground at a shallow depth. Lots of other caterpillars that don't burrow underground, they will form their cocoon in the shelter of the leaf litter. Those leaves, they provide important concealment from predators, and they also provide a degree of insulation against various extremes in weather and moisture. Some caterpillars will even use fallen leaves as the outermost layer of their cocoon. And that's actually what we have here. What looks like a clump of leaves in the center of this image, in fact, is a cocoon. And, it doesn't look like much is happening here, but inside of that cocoon, the caterpillar is metamorphosing into its adult form, and soon it will emerge. And there we have it. In this case, that was the cocoon of the Luna moth, one of our most beautiful native moths, with a 4.5-inch wingspan, lime green coloration, and long streaming tails. Now, if your tree has a Virginia creeper growing in it, then you might find that you are supporting the caterpillar of the Pandora's Sphinx. This is a picture that I took at the nursery just a few months ago. And for those of you that don't know, our nursery is in a very urban environment. We're in North Collinwood, right next to I-90, and it's a residential area, lots of businesses around, and still we found this extraordinary caterpillar that was feeding on the Virginia creeper, which was growing in our redbud tree. Now, this caterpillar is one of the ones that, when it's time for it to undergo its cocoon stage, it will go down to the surface of the ground and it will actually burrow into the soil to form its cocoon. And when it emerges from that cocoon, it is a pretty glorious looking moth. This is the Pandora's Sphinx moth, just slightly smaller than the Luna moth. This one has 3.5 to 4-inch wingspan and really quite beautiful. It's active at night and it visits many flowers for nectar, and some of its favorites are milkweeds. Now, unfortunately, the way that we commonly landscape beneath our trees makes it almost impossible for any of the caterpillars that are feeding on the foliage of the tree to reach adulthood. And this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. This is a Shumard oak. So this is a glorious native tree that on its own can support the development of over 400 different species of caterpillars. But because we have raked and mowed turf grass going up to the base of the tree, almost none of those caterpillars would be able to successfully complete their cocoon stage. And why is that? Well, all of those passes of the lawnmower, they're going to compact the soil. So all of those caterpillars, like the Pandora's Sphinx, that burrow into the soil to form their cocoon, they're going to have a very hard time doing that in this compacted soil that's been pressed down by the lawnmower time and time again. Also, you'll notice there are no fallen leaves. All of those caterpillars that rely on the shelter and concealment of the leaf litter, they are going to be exposed to predators and environmental extremes of temperature and moisture. So they're going to have a very hard time making it. Finally, all of those passes of the lawnmower, that's a physical hazard. You know, that's going to chop up grass, leaves, twigs, cocoons, caterpillars, anything that's in its way. So rather than this kind of landscaping scenario beneath our trees, what we should be aiming for is this. This is the soft landings garden. It's an area of native plants beneath the tree that allows for the caterpillar cocoon stage to happen. And as this photograph illustrates quite well, it's also an opportunity to plant native wildflowers that are going to be blooming throughout the growing season and that will provide floral resources to our pollinators. Now, it can be hard to find flowers that will grow, in the shady environment of a soft landings garden. So I'm going to talk about a series of wildflowers that will do very well in this kind of growing environment. The first plant that I would highlight, and I'll talk about these, in going from spring bloomers to fall bloomers. The first plant that I would highlight is golden ragwort. So this is going to be blooming in May, and it has many positive attributes to it. And it's certainly a flower that you would want to have growing in your soft landings garden. It only gets about 2 feet tall, but it gets a really nice, dense cluster of bright yellow flower heads, very cheerful in the springtime. And the plant is very good at forming a tight clump of stems and foliage, and it will actually spread, quite thoroughly so that it can actually form a ground cover beneath your tree. It'll spread by both rhizome and seed. And after these flowers fade, after several weeks of blooming, that foliage is going to remain throughout the growing season and even into the winter. It has a semi-evergreen character, so it forms a very nice lasting ground cover. The golden ragwort is also very resistant to deer herbivory. So if you have a deer browse issue in your yard, I would highly recommend this plant. Now, golden ragwort is going to do best in consistently moist soil. If you have more dry conditions under your plant or under your tree, then I would recommend, let's see here. Oh, what do we have here? There is a closely related species. I'm blanking on the name at the moment, but there's another ragwort that looks almost exactly like this one, and it does better in drier conditions. And that might be the one for you if you have drier conditions under your tree. In terms of wildlife value, the golden ragwort is primarily going to be serving short-tongued pollinators, specifically small carpenter bees and hoverflies, as well as small sweat bees. When they, wake up from their, winter hibernation, this is one of the first flowers that greets them, and it's important as an early season floral resource. Another plant that I would recommend for the springtime for your soft landings garden is Jacob's Ladder. Jacob's Ladder, it's got these beautiful blue flowers, and blue is a very rare color for your flower garden. And in fact, blue is the favored color among bees. There aren't many blue flowers out there, but research demonstrates that bees are actually especially drawn to blue flowers. And Jacob's Ladder, in addition to attracting those short-tongued pollinators that the golden ragwort is attracting, it'll also attract larger pollinators like bumblebees and some early season moths and butterflies. The foliage on Jacob's Ladder is just stunning. It has these pinnately compound leaves, and after those flowers fade, that foliage is going to persist throughout the growing season. Now, as we move on into the middle of summer, I must admit, it's difficult to find shade-tolerant flowers that are blooming in the month of July. But if you want to add some ornamental interest to your garden during that time, I recommend you plant bottlebrush grass. So bottlebrush grass, it's going to develop these really interesting geometrical seed heads, and it'll do that right at the beginning of summer. So, they'll offer some aesthetic interest during that time when you perhaps don't have as many flowers blooming. Bottlebrush grass is not an aggressive grass, but it's really kind of special in terms of its shade tolerance, because there are very few shade tolerant grasses, but this is a great one for your soft landings garden. Now, even though there is a lack of flowers that tolerate full shade that are blooming in midsummer, we do have some very nice options in terms of partial shade adapted flowers. So these are flowers that could be planted on the edge of your soft landings garden near the outer portion of your tree canopy. Also, if your tree is one that maybe has an open canopy where you have sunlight streaming through the branches in places, then these would all be good options. The white bergamot here in the top right corner, perhaps you're familiar with wild bergamot that gets pink blooms, and it's typically planted in sunny spots. The white bergamot has all of the pollinator value that one does, but it has good tolerance for partial shade. And these white blooms, they are especially attractive to moths. So it's kind of like I don't know, it's a fun thing to envision that after, the sun goes down and Lights are out, the moths come out, and they're visiting the white bergamot in your garden. Um, Short-toothed mountain mint down here in the bottom right. Um, this plant, while it doesn't have showy blooms, it has beautiful silvery foliage, and it's super versatile in terms of where it can grow. Partial shade, full sun. Um, it has good drought tolerance or just average moisture, and it has a very long bloom time, and it's attractive to so many pollinators. Oxeye sunflower. This is another one that has an extremely long bloom time. This is going to bloom June all the way through August. Does very well in partial shade, and it does very well at handling those dry conditions that you oftentimes encounter at the base of your tree. Purple coneflower. Everybody plants this in full sun, but purple coneflower, while it does quite well in full sun, it's actually a forest edge plant, and it does very well in partial shade. This is another one that has a very long bloom time and can really add some wonderful color to your soft landings garden in the middle of summer. Now, as we move on to late summer and early fall, the first plant that I would recommend is white wood aster over here on the left. White wood aster is another one that blooms for a really long time. It'll bloom all the way through August on into the middle of September and still be going strong. It only gets about 1.5 feet tall, so it's not an overly imposing plant. It's very good at spreading to fill in your space. And it's also like a banquet for bumblebees. Bumblebees are really drawn to this plant. If you look at those flower heads, you'll notice that there are yellow flower heads and kind of rosy centered flower heads. This is actually a message that the plant is sending to the bees, telling them where they should focus their efforts. Once one of these flower heads gets depleted in viable pollen, the plant will cause that flower head to change from yellow center to rosy center. And what it's doing is it's telling bees, hey, don't waste your time on the rosy centered flowers. They don't have any viable pollen. And you'd say, well, what does a bee care about viable pollen? It cares because the viable pollen is more nutritious. It has a higher protein content. So it's doing a favor for the bees, but of course, it's serving its own interests because the viable pollen is what's going to help the plant to reproduce. So, other flowers, once they get depleted in viable pollen, they would simply, the flower head would just wither. But the thing about the asters, they keep those depleted flower heads open because it creates a more impressive floral display. So it's getting the attention of those pollinators from far away. It's drawing them in. And then once they're up close, they focus their efforts on those yellow centered flower heads. And researchers have found that indeed bees know, they understand the message, they get what's being communicated to them, and they don't waste their time on those rosy disked flowers. I've seen this myself because this is a trait that's common to all of the plants that we commonly call aster. And I was looking at some asters in my backyard this summer, and sure enough, those bees, they don't even bother with those rosy centered flower heads. They go right for the yellow centered ones. So anyway, now you're in on that secret cue that's being sent to the bees. Finally, moving on into September, the plant that I would recommend is zigzag goldenrod. Zigzag goldenrod is another one that'll form a colony of plants to fill in your space. It's not, an overly imposing plant, only gets a couple feet tall, but it gets a very nice crown of blossoms there. And the goldenrods are so critical for supporting pollinators, and they support such biodiversity in terms of their, pollinator benefits, that these are called keystone plants. And it's recommended that every garden have at least one goldenrod. And zigzag goldenrod is really the one for your soft landings garden. Okay, If you want to add some structure to your soft landings garden, maybe plant a shrub. A really nice shade tolerant shrub is spice bush. Spice bush can definitely grow very well in low light conditions, gets really nice fall color. And also, this bush is highly resistant to deer browse. If you break those spice bush leaves, they're very fragrant and aromatic. That's a tip off. Whenever a plant has fragrant foliage, you can bet that deer are going to leave it alone. And that's very much the case with spice bush. Another thing that's really cool about spice bush is it produces berries that are very high in fat content. These berries are like 50% fat by weight. I actually tasted one when I was in the woods a while back, and it's like a fatty, oily berry. And this is actually an evolutionary adaptation of the plant. It's producing those berries when the songbirds are migrating south. And those birds, they've got a long way to go. They need, energy dense food, and those fatty berries are exactly what they need. And the birds will preferentially feed on high fat content berries like spice bush, and then they fly off and they disperse them far and wide. So, yeah, really outstanding wildlife value there with the spice bush. Now, the thing I'll say about it, though, is that this is one of those plants where you need a male and a female in order to produce the berries. So, and unfortunately, we can't tell, when the plant is in its seedling stage, whether it's male or female. But if you buy 3 of them, you have a 75% chance of getting a male and a female. So I promise that's not it's not a deal that we worked out with the spice bush. That's just the way that it works. So if you're shopping for spice bush, just something to keep in mind. Okay, let's say that the tree in the center of your soft landings garden is on the decline. It's not going to be around for too long. You can get a head start planning for the future, for its future replacement, by planting a shade tolerant tree under the canopy of your current tree. Black gum is a very good tree to go with. Stunning fall foliage. It's also a berry producer. The blossoms that this tree has, they are a real magnet for bees and other pollinators. Also, the black gum is tolerant of a super wide range of moisture, like more so than like any other tree that I know of. Out in natural areas, you'll find this growing on dry ridge tops, and you'll also find it growing on swamp margins. Unfortunately, the black gum is another one where you have to have a male and a female. But there are other options like red maple, American hornbeam, eastern hop hornbeam. Just a thought if you're wanting to plan ahead and get a new tree started in your shady area. Okay, so let's say you're sold. You want to make a soft landings garden. The first thing you're going to want to do is eliminate the grass and weeds that are already growing in that space, because you don't want them competing with the flowers that you're putting in there. One way to accomplish this is called sheet mulching. This is where you use a layer of cardboard topped by a layer of leaves to smother that pre-existing vegetation. You're going to want to leave these materials in place for about a month. And then wherever you want to plant a plant, you just brush those leaves aside, cut a hole in the cardboard where you want to put that plant, and you put it right in there. And then, that's it. Over time, the cardboard and the leaves, they'll just break down and they don't ever have to be removed. I will say, though, the leaves tend to blow around a lot. So you're going to want to put, in this image, there's a short wire fence that's been put around this to contain it. That's very helpful. Those leaves will still shift around a lot. I found that putting a very light sprinkling of wood mulch on top helps to keep those leaves in place. Okay, other design considerations for your soft landings garden. how many plants to plant? Well, one plant per square foot is optimal because it means that that garden is going to fill in the very first growing season. And the sooner it fills in, the sooner you don't have to worry about weeds. However, one plant per square foot gets pretty pricey. So I would say you can go down to one plant per 4 square feet. This is going to be, a more economical option. It's not going to look too sparse, and it won't take forever to fill in. I would say probably within 2 to 3 growing seasons. I would recommend that you arrange your plants in clusters by species. So for instance, if you've got 3 white wood asters, plant them in a triangular arrangement like we have here. And the sides of that triangle are going to be about 1 foot. If you're planting a plant that is going to be 3 feet or taller, then the sides of that triangle are going to be 2 feet. And why do we say plant these plants in clusters? It's because when they're in bloom, they're going to be more visually impressive. This is going to make your garden look better to people who walk by, and also it's going to be more visually apparent to pollinators. Research has shown that once a flower cluster gets 3 feet wide in diameter, it attracts a higher diversity and abundance of pollinators. Finally, try to plant more than 7 species of flowers in your soft landings garden. Again, this is going to give a boost to your abundance and diversity of pollinators. Other habitat features that I would recommend that you include would be leaves as a ground cover, the leaf litter. We've already seen how that's important for those caterpillars, but that's also important for lots of other beneficial insects. Lightning bugs, lacewings, hoverflies, many more have life stages that take place in the leaf litter. So you want that to be your natural ground cover. Finally, and the reason why I mentioned large rocks, underneath the base of the rock, that's a cool, moist environment where invertebrates can go to escape the sunlight. And ground beetles in particular, they'll shelter under that rock, and then they'll come out at nighttime and they'll feed on aphids and slugs. So they're kind of like policing the environment and keeping away some pests that you don't want. Okay, I'll speak a little bit more detail about another habitat feature. Decaying wood, like an old log. This is a great habitat feature to have in your soft landings garden because it can be a nesting site for bees. One bee, I would say 30% of our bee species, they nest in cavities above ground. Oftentimes, these are old insect burrows in dead wood. One bee that nests this way is the pure green sweat bee, pictured here. It's one of our most beautiful bees. It's a goldish green, shiny bee. And when it's looking for a place to nest, it's looking for a log in a shady, moist environment. It'll enter that log through an old beetle burrow or, an old ant burrow, and it will then enlarge that burrow and create chambers for its larvae. So if you put an old log in your soft landings garden, you could be giving a home to the pure green sweat bee. You might be saying to yourself, okay, that sounds great, but what are the odds that's really going to happen in my garden? Well, I took these photos just this past summer in a yard in Cleveland Heights. Basically the backyard was like a soft landings garden. It was just a shady kind of place that was full of plants. And here, this old decaying stump that was next to the patio, I took a closer look, and there was the pure green sweat bee going in and out. making its nest. So it could happen in your yard too. Okay. I just want to say a quick word about garden presentation. So there are basically, two broad styles of gardens. There's the more formal garden, which is kind of like what you see along the fence back here. It's neat and tidy, and oftentimes space is maintained between the plants. And then there's the more naturalistic garden, and that's represented here in the middle. And this, you know, kind of mimics a more natural presentation, has kind of a more wild look to it. And the thing is that people with traditional tastes in gardens, um, they sometimes are not fond of the more naturalistic garden. I personally am. Um, but I have, and this could be a source of tension between, gardeners and their neighbors. Um, but anyway, what I have found is that you can make a naturalistic garden um, acceptable to people with traditional tastes simply by putting a fence or border around it. This is a soft landings garden that I planted in my aunt's backyard. And as you can see, she is a woman who had very formal taste previously, and she was quite pleased with this garden. And I think that the fence went a long way toward, making it fit in within the context of that space. Of course, there's nothing about native plants that says you can't have a formal garden. You certainly can. But if you want to have a naturalistic garden, putting a fence around it and a sign is a nice way to kind of make it look a little more ship-shape. Okay, so almost all of the plants that I highlighted in today's presentation are available at the nursery where I work, Meadow City. We would love to see you in May. That's when we're going to be opening up for this coming season. It's going to be our 3rd year. And, we love the energy of the people in our neighborhood and in the greater Cleveland area. I think that folks are really keyed into native plant gardening, and we're all making a big difference with what we do in our yards. And certainly, the soft landings garden, it's one of the most important places that you can plant those native flowering plants. And I'll just end with this last image here. So this is my own soft landings garden in my yard. And, parents like to show pictures of their kids. I don't have any kids, but I'll show a picture of my garden. It's kind of like, it gets very dreamy in the fall. I've got the blue flower is, oh, for heaven's sakes, heartleaf aster. The white flower, that's white snakeroot. This one that's gone to seed here, that's a sweet Joe pie. So I didn't do a great job in spacing out the bloom times of my plants. They kind of bloom all in the fall. Maybe you'll learn from my mistake, but in the fall, it looks great. So anyway, thanks a lot, folks. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And we do have a few questions. If you have questions, please put it in the Q&A chat and we will answer them live. So Kathy wants to know, if I want to start soft landing garden under maple trees surrounded by compacted grass, do you recommend improving the soil first? And how much mulch can I place without damaging tree roots?
Yeah, so I don't think that you need to I don't think you need to do like, yeah, if the area has been in turf grass, like, yeah, there is going to be some compaction, from past years, but I don't think you need to do anything to rectify that other than foregoing, any future mowing. And if you transition it to a soft landings garden, then, that's the compacted situation is going to alleviate with just a little bit of time. And the sheet mulching is, it's a great way to make that transition. And also, that mulch, that organic matter, and the flowers that you put in there, they're going to do a lot to alleviate any compaction as well. In terms of the amount of mulch that you would put down, it's a great point. You don't want to, smother your tree roots. We have to be aware of that. But the thing about the leaf litter, um, it's not really forming a kind of like dense layer. You wouldn't want to bring in soil and put that on top of your cardboard. But if you put down a single layer of cardboard and you put down a few inches of leaves, not to a crazy depth, just so that you don't see the cardboard anymore, um, that's all, you'd be in good shape for going forward.
And how far out from the base of a tree do you put the mulch as to not ruin its roots? Or even like the soft garden, do you put it out to the drip line or do you go a little bit further?
Yeah, it's a good rule of thumb not to plant uh, any plants within 3 feet of the trunk of your tree. Um, but you know, in the what was I going to say? In the forest, you've got leaves falling down to the base of the tree, uh, pretty much all the way up to the trunk of the tree. Um, in my opinion, if you're if we're mimicking a natural situation, then we don't really have to worry too much. So yeah, I don't think you have to worry if the leaves that you're raking into your soft landings garden are going up to the trunk of your tree. But I probably wouldn't disturb the soil within, 3 feet of the trunk, just because there are going to be roots there that you don't want to damage. And it's a good point. I mean, if you're really getting the most out of your soft landings garden, then you're going to be occupying all of the space under the drip line of the tree. So that's the full extent, the full reach of the canopy. Now that could be a big undertaking, and I would say, anything is better than nothing. So if you've only got, I don't know, maybe the time and energy to start small, and maybe extend it a little bit over time. Um, yeah, that would be my advice.
Go in phases. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you answered that one too. How close to the base of our 7-year-old red maple can we plant? You took care of that one. I did put your Meadow City nursery address in the chat. Is your nursery included in the Homegrown National Park Directory?
That's a great question, and I do not know. My friend Julie, she handles some of those administrative and networking details, and I don't know if she has put us in that directory. But now that you mention it, I'd really like to be a part of that, because I think that Homegrown National Park is it's just an inspiring movement. So thanks for mentioning that.
All right, got a question about eastern white pines. They're really acidic. What can you plant under that? Is there anything specific?
That's a good question. And I would say that, you know, when it comes to being pH specific, um, a lot of trees have very clear pH preferences. But I will say that for a lot of our wildflowers, they tend to have a fairly broad pH tolerance. So I would say that, you know, the oh, round-leaved ragwort. I was trying to think of, when I was talking about the golden ragwort earlier, there was the ragwort for drier soil that I was blanking on the name. It's round-leaved ragwort. I would say, round-leaved ragwort would be a good one to plant in that situation. I personally have seen heartleaf aster growing under pines. What else? I think that the white wood aster would be a nice one to try. Even blue stem goldenrod, that would be another plant that I would give a try, that I would try. You often see that growing in oak forests, and oaks tend to, I mean, I'll tell you, in Northeast Ohio, a lot of our soil is acidic. And it doesn't have to be, it's not just limited to what's underneath pines. Um, if you're out in natural areas, like, yeah, you're pretty much dealing with soil that's oftentimes pH 5.5, even lower than that. I think you don't have to limit yourself too much. Those flowers that I mentioned, those would be a good start. But if I were in doubt, I would just give it a shot. I think that all of the flowers that were included in this presentation are likely candidates for doing well there.
Okay. I'm answering some other questions about, yes, the chat's disabled. I will rectify that for the next uh, webinar. Let's see. Do you know more about the caterpillars that descend from the trees via silk, or do some just drop from the canopy on plop on the ground? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of them descend via silk. The that Pandora Sphinx that I showed the picture of that we had at the nursery, that's one that would just climb down. It would climb down that vine. So I think there are certainly going to be some caterpillars that are going to be climbing down the tree. But to be honest, I don't really know like what percentage of caterpillars are going to be descending via silk versus climbing versus just falling. I'm not sure. But the important number is that 90% of those caterpillars are going to be coming down to the ground to undergo their cocoon stage.
And if you're planting in May, when should you install the sheet mulch?
That's a great question, because you want to have that sheet mulching in place for at least 1 month prior to planting, and it needs to be during the growing season, like when when the weeds and grass are not dormant. So, having said that, um, grass typically starts growing in April. So I would say, you know, probably you could go with like April 1st. Or yeah, like put it down, put your sheet mulching materials down anytime in April, and then 1 month later, that would be a good time to plant.
And what do you think about rubber mulch?
I don't think that's good, because for one thing, it's not biodegradable. And I would think that there's probably some I don't know. I don't know much about the manufacture of rubber mulch, but I'm thinking it's probably an energy intensive process.
Mhm.
Um, it could be that it's recycling, tires or
Yeah, it
something,
is.
and it's keeping them out of a landfill. But in terms of habitat value, I think that it would be very low.
It's
The
good for a
idea
playground, not for a garden.
Exactly. The ideal ground cover for your garden is going to be leaf litter. Leaves are really the best thing, because they play an important role in the life cycles of so many beneficial insects. Um, Wood mulch is not bad for getting started, because sometimes you don't have a bunch of leaves on hand. So, you can go to the hardware store and pick up some wood mulch. I would say that that's not a bad option. But as that wood mulch breaks down, don't replace it with more wood mulch. Replace
Mhm.
it with leaves from your yard. So you'll gradually make that transition. The other thing is, 70% of our bees are ground nesters, and the wood mulch it can be a bit of a barrier for those bees, for them to, access the soil and, burrow down in there. Whereas leaf litter does not, pose that same barrier. So wood mulch isn't bad. It's um, it's a good way to get started, but over time you want to replace it with the leaf litter.
Do you have any recommendations for a yard that is perpendicular wooded slopes that are consistently moist and face to the west?
Oh, consistently moist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know what? We've got a lot of plants at the nursery that are like wetland indicator species. They don't have to be, I mean, they don't have you don't have to they can handle like just average moisture, but really what they want is consistently moist soil. Um, that golden ragwort that I mentioned, that's one of them. I mean, consistently moist soil, the golden ragwort would do really well there. For that matter, zigzag goldenrod, that last plant that I highlighted, that's a plant of oftentimes grows in riparian areas. Um, that would be another a really nice option. And then I'm sure that we have more. We have a whole section of the nursery dedicated, yeah, to these plants that like wetter conditions. So um, I would recommend that you stop by and check it out. We have you know a lot of different plants that could be good for you.
Good. Couple more. So let's say you get a place that has a significant amount of English ivy or myrtle under the trees. What's the best way of getting rid of that?
Yeah. Okay. Um, well, the first thing that I would do is um, honestly just try to pull it out. And you can make a really big dent on a plant like that by pulling it out. Um, Now the thing is though, um, you know, I I don't want to just speculate because um, I have been involved with you know removal of English ivy before, and the way that we went about it was simply by hand pulling. But the thing is, we didn't return to the site, so I don't know, you know, what the I don't know, what the long-term outlook is in terms of like how much the plant grows back. So I'm sorry, I don't have like the perfect answer for you on that one. Um, but yeah, I do think that pulling it out would be like a good start. And then, you could see what the regrowth is like and maybe just do a targeted kind of removal going forward after that.
Okay, sounds good. We're going to tackle three questions about mulch all at once. So one is about natural chips through chip drop. How long do they take to break down? If you have sweet peat under your trees, do you still need sheet mulch or can you just add leaves and plant? And then what's your opinion on biochar?
Okay. Yeah, so the question about like the wood mulch, how long does it take to break down? And you know, in we used wood mulch for the soft landings garden that we started right next to the nursery. And while let's see here, and we put that wood mulch down not this past summer, so not the summer of 2024, but the summer of 2023. We didn't add any additional wood mulch to it. The wood mulch is still present, but it's much thinner and the it's in much smaller fragments. So yeah, I don't know how long it would take for all of it to break down entirely, but for it to get to a point where like there's some soil that starts to be exposed, offering those kind of like pupation sites for the caterpillars that dig and for those bees that are going to be digging their burrows. I would say within 2 years, um, you have significant decomposition. Um, Sweet peat is not a product I'm familiar with, I've definitely heard about it, but I just, never sought out more information on it. And I would say that you don't have to do sheet mulching if you don't have uh, significant grass and weeds that are in that space. So if your area is already pretty devoid of undesirable plants, then you don't have to do any additional removal or any kind of, yeah, like, I don't know, like preparation in terms of sheet mulching. So yeah, if you can just go right in there and start planting. And there was a what was the third question?
Biochar. Do you recommend adding biochar into your soil? And if so, are there any issues that require ongoing monitoring?
Yeah. Um, I think, I mean, so I've heard that biochar, um, it's like presents a really good, uh, I don't know, outlook in terms of like carbon sequestration, because it's like a really long-lived kind of like carbon that's not going to be, getting respired or anything. But I do not think that you need to add biochar, or for that matter, any other amendment, generally speaking, to the soil that you have. Um, Lots of you know, a lot of the native plants, they don't necessarily have high nutrient demands. In fact, if it's a lower nutrient environment, oftentimes they're more competitive and there's less weed pressure. So I would say, just as a rule of thumb, you generally shouldn't have to amend your soil with any particular product. And I don't know what impact biochar would have on the yeah, on that substrate there in terms of like affecting the growth of the plants. I would think that any product that's marketed, for home application is probably not going to like make it tough on the flowers that you're trying to grow. But I would say you definitely don't need to do it uh, when you're trying to start a native plant garden, whether it's a soft landings garden or another.
Yeah. All right. Two more. We did get sweet peat is mostly composted horse bedding. So with all the wood shavings and stuff in there, yeah, you probably don't need to add any more mulch. So two more questions. Any specific sedges that would work in soft landings garden?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, we have a really nice one at the nursery. It's called plantain leaf sedge. And this is like, it's a broadleaf sedge. So it really contributes a really cool kind of like texture to your garden. And that sedge in particular, um, yeah, it doesn't need to be in an overly wet environment like some sedges do. Um, so yeah, I would say plantain leaf sedge. And then we do have a few other sedges that I think could be really nice. There's oh, what else? Um, there's a sedge called Carex Pennsylvania. So some other sedges that I just kind of know offhand that we don't necessarily have at the nursery, but I'll throw out there because I think they could be good. Um, there's Carex Pennsylvanica. Um, I don't know the common name of that one. Um, and then there's also a sedge called, let's see here. There's a sedge called wood sedge. And yeah, the Latin name for that one is Carex blanda. And I have had success with that in like a soft landings kind of context. But in terms of what we have at the nursery, definitely that plantain leaf sedge is really cool looking, and I would recommend it.
Oh. And then so we have a small suburban front yard under a buckeye tree. Any kind of pollinator plants that would fit well under there? So
Yeah,
compact.
generally generally a buckeye is growing. If if you got a buckeye growing there and it's doing pretty well, then that suggests to me that the soil is, it's not like, droughty. It's not dry and droughty, because otherwise the buckeye wouldn't be doing too well. And So yeah, pretty much, you know, all of these, so the plants that I highlighted today in the talk, I think those would all, be a good choice. Um, Another really nice one for, there are a couple midsummer bloomers that they do that in addition to the ones that I highlighted. Uh, there's a plant called Sweet Joe Pie, which is let's see here. It's yeah, Eutrochium purpureum. Um Most of the Joe pies, you see them growing in sunny places. Sweet Joe Pie, it blooms in July. It gets kind of like a pinkish coloration to it. And it has good shade tolerance. So I love that plant. I've been like talking to my colleagues. I was like, we need to get this, and we are gonna have some available this coming year at the nursery. But Sweet Joe Pie would be great. Another one um, that I would recommend is oh, Harry Woodmint. Harry Woodmint. This one, it'll like that, moist soil. Um, I've seen it growing in kind of like floodplain environments in Cuyahoga Valley National Park where buckeyes are growing in the very near vicinity. And that one blooms in like July. So it's a really good midsummer option. Um, that golden ragwort uh, that I highlighted earlier on, I also see that one growing in these kind of like floodplain environments where the buckeyes grow. Same thing with the zigzag goldenrod. Um, yeah, I think you should have a lot of options.
Good. And so the last thing is, do you recommend supplementing water for the first year or two?
Oh, okay. You definitely want to water, like if you're planting live plants, you definitely want to water them for the first couple weeks. Um, so they can you know, get established. Um, if you're planting in the springtime, um, you're going to want to keep an eye on things because this past year, obviously, I mean, it was just dry as could be.
Hmm.
And especially if you planted plants in the springtime, they probably haven't sent those roots far and wide yet. So, yes, keep an eye on your plants and water them as needed. Your plants are going to kind of tell you when they need water. You'll see them start to flag. But when you see that, you need to respond. You can't put it off. Um, and for the most part, plants aren't going to mind extra water. So if you're in doubt, go ahead and give them extra, go ahead and give them water. I will say that planting in the fall does kind of minimize your water needs in terms of that following growing season because the plants have more time to put out their roots. Um, but even so, I think the first year of the plant's life, keep an eye on it because it's not fully established yet. So even a plant that would be drought tolerant in the long term, that first year, it might need a little extra help. So, short answer is definitely water the first 2 weeks. And yes, during the first year that a plant is in place, especially if it was planted in the spring, it couldn't help to give it some supplemental water.
Sounds good. All right, Dave, thank you so much. Fantastic pictures,
Oh,
great content. We all love it. Now, Meadow City, the website, do you have a species list up there?
yeah, I mean, the website doesn't have a single list, but it does have all the plants. Um, our whole selection is there on the website. So you can, peruse the plants. They all have detailed descriptions. And yeah, and when it comes time to purchasing your plants, you could even order them online and then pick them up at the nursery. We'll, find them and have them set aside for you. So if you're in a hurry, you can just pick them up and go.
All right. I hope to see you guys head out to Meadow City in May. And Dave, thank you again so much. Thank you, everybody. See you again in 2 weeks.
Oh, thanks so much.